Shapes are a really cool feature in After Effects. There are all kinds of things you can do with shapes. Shapes have a unique set of properties that you can use to create some really wild animations. In this lesson, I want to introduce you to the 5 basic methods that you can use to make shapes and give you a taste of some of the animations you can do. In subsequent lessons, I'm going to walk you through each of those 5 methods and then dive deeper into the animation possibilities. This is intended to just be a demonstration, but if you want to follow along, feel free. Open up After Effects. Start a new comp. I'm going to go with my HD comp here. All right, now we're going to create a shape, and the most logical way to create one is using a shape tool up here. There are 5 shape tools. In fact, there are really 3. I'll explain why there are 3 when you can see 5 here in the next lesson. But I'll click on the polygon tool, which is also called a polystar. And when I drag here, it's going to create a new shape layer, and it's going to take on the characteristics here that were applied to the most recent shape that I made. So I'll just drag this, and there's that shape. When you drag it like this, you can use keyboard shortcuts to change it as you drag it, but it's not so critical because once you make it, you can always go down here into its shape layer, open up the polystar, which is what that guy is there, and change its characteristics here. You can change the number of points, like so. You can change whether they're kind of going in or out, whatever you like, and how round they are, things like that. You can also change the colors after the fact. We got a stroke and a fill. We can change the color to whatever we'd like. Doesn't have to be that color. We can always go to something else. Put gradients inside there, put gradients in the stroke as well. It gets really pretty wild. And the really cool thing about shape layers is that off to the right-hand side here, there's this property group, this collection of properties that you can apply to shape layers. And most of these guys are unique to shape layers, such as pucker and bloat, repeater, those kinds of things. These things give you a chance to really make your shapes look pretty wild. Let me close this thing down. Now we'll create a shape freehand. So I'll click away here to deselect that, turn it off. And click on the pen tool here. With the pen tool, I can draw a shape freehand like this. Finish it off like so. After I'm done, I can change the characteristics here if I want to. Float up and down, that kind of stuff. What's cool is that I can keyframe these changes. If I want to have it start like this, and then a few seconds later look like that, I can keyframe those changes. And again, when you do something freehand like this, it too has those possibilities to use these shape animation properties. All right. Another way to make a shape is from a vector file. So I'm going to go get an Illustrator file here. We'll go get, let's say, this purple fish here. And I'll bring it into our comp right there. There's our little fish. And, you might be asking, why bother turning this into a shape when it already is kind of a shape? If I click on it like that and I can drag it up, and since it's a vector file, it will rasterize all the time. Right now it looks a little fuzzy, but if I click this continuously rasterize switch here and zoom it up, it looks just fine. Let me scale it down a little bit here. This doesn't get too large, but you can see that you can scale it, so why bother turning it into a shape? If you turn it into the shape, you have access to those cool properties again, so I'll do that right now. Right-click on this guy and say Create Shapes from the vector layer. It creates a shape there. It turns the actual original Illustrator file off like that. There's no eyeballs turned off there, but this guy is now turned on. It's a shape layer. See that little star there that tells you it's a shape layer. If I open that up, you'll see it has that lovely little add there. So for example, I can add what's called a repeater. I'll scroll down here and see some of the characteristics here. We'll have more than just 3 copies. I have a bunch of copies like that. Change what's called the offset. Go down farther. You can do other cool things here. When you add a repeater like this, we can say, let's just scale the fish a little bit like that. So you got one big guy and a bunch of small ones going off in the distance. Rotate it like so, or drop the opacity for the end. See how that works? All the various possibilities here as you work with these guys. That's one of the cool things about working with a shape layer, is that you can do all these great things and also animate the heck out of it. So there you go. All right, a couple more ways to make shapes. Let me close this guy down, turn it off. You can make shapes from paths that you've copied from programs like Photoshop. So let me go to Photoshop. So here we have this image inside Photoshop, and I've created a path around it, which is easy to do. Just use the selection tool to do that. Let's just take the path and copy it, Control or Command C, and go back to After Effects. And in After Effects, I can create a new shape layer. So take my pen tool and just put a mark there to say there is a new shape. Open it up. It has a path, which is different than shape layers when you create a shape layer from scratch. When you create a shape layer with the pen tool, it has this thing called a path, which you can animate, which is really cool. So I'll turn on keyframes for it and go Control or Command V, and that adds our little hummingbird. I can take my selection tool if I want to here, let's say, and we can expand the size of that little fella. a little bit. Just kind of drag it up a bit, hold my shift key down. All right. I can go back to Photoshop now, and I can copy another path here. I've got a path around this fish. I'll copy it, back to After Effects, and I can have this shape here, this hummingbird shape, morph into the fish very simply by just adding a keyframe for that fish. Let's watch the little morph take place here. It goes from there to there, and all those little dots and things can go away if I just click off there. So it goes from there to there. All right, that's 4 ways to make shapes. There's one more way to do this. That's to use a preset. So I'm going to go over to Effects and Presets, kind of browse to Bridge to take a look at some of these presets. And inside the presets, there's something called Shapes with multiple possibilities. Take a look at these guys. You'll see that some of them are animated like that. Back over here and say Elements, like this guy here. With these guys selected, you can just double click on them and bring them in as well. You can change the size of this one. And you can watch it animate. You can use these presets as a great way to start off a new kind of a shape. So you can see there are all kinds of things you can do with shapes, and I'm going to explain those possibilities in more detail in the rest of the lessons in this chapter.